Hey guys, today I'm sharing how we painted this mid-century modern desk with chalk paint. We picked it up from a local thrift store for $15. It does have a laminate top, but the rest of it is all real wood with dovetail joints in the drawers. Honestly, it wasn't in horrible condition, but it did have a few chips on the drawers, and I think it used to have a brace on the side between the two legs because it had some damage on those legs. You might have seen this desk in our other video that compared 4 different primers when painting laminate furniture. So, when it came time to paint this desk, I had to remove all of the primer and paint that I had painted on top of it. I used my favorite chemical stripper to remove the primer, then I repaired these few damaged areas with my favorite wood filler. This quick wood epoxy is my go-to product for fixing damage on furniture anymore. It's kind of the consistency of clay, so you can shape it however you need it to be, and it dries super hard in about an hour. The best part is that it doesn't have harsh fumes like Bondo. When the repairs were completely dry, I sanded them down smooth with 150 grit sandpaper and 220 grit sandpaper. Then I scuff sanded everything else to get it ready for paint. Scuff sanding is just a quick little sanding with 220 grit sandpaper, and it really helps paint stick to the finished wood surface. I used my Surf Prep sander to help me scuff sand everything, but you really don't need any fancy tools to scuff sand. A small sheet of 220 grit sandpaper folded in half is all that I used to use before I got my Surf Prep sander. I personally prefer 220 grit sandpaper for scuff sanding because I feel like the more coarse sandpaper is just too coarse and it leaves too many scratches behind. And then I took it outside and sprayed 2 coats of clear shellac on it. This stuff is my absolute favorite primer, even though it is technically not marketed as a primer. It does a great job of blocking bleed-through stains from staining the paint, but it also actually helps the paint stick to any surface, including laminate. I use it on basically every single piece that I paint. I especially love that it's clear too, because then I can distress the paint if I want. And I love that it's already in a spray can, so I don't have to roll or brush it on. Honestly, my only complaint about it is that it stinks, so I have to use it outdoors or make sure the space that I'm in is ventilated really well. Then, I let the clear shellac dry overnight before I was ready to paint. It might look like I go overboard with the prep work, and maybe I do, I don't know. But I want my paint job to last as long as possible. Cleaning, repairing, scuff sanding, and priming is how I can ensure that. So no, you don't have to sand and prime before painting with chalk paint, but honestly, if you skip those steps, you're pretty likely to run into problems with your finish scratching easily or having stains in it, and it's just not worth it to me. For this piece, I chose to use Country Chic Paint's chalk paint in the color Dune Grass. I'm a huge fan of spraying paint on instead of brushing it on, and I loaded up my beginner-friendly paint sprayer with it. Check out the link in the description for everything you need to know about using this paint sprayer with chalk paint, including how to thin the chalk paint, how to clean the sprayer, and how to actually use the sprayer. I actually created a video all about how to use this paint sprayer, and I used this desk makeover to do it. Back to the paint though. I sprayed 3 coats of paint all over the desk, letting the paint dry for about an hour between coats. I'm a bit unconventional when I spray, in that I leave the drawers in. I love leaving the drawers in because it saves space in my painting area, and it also saves my back from bending over a bunch of drawers on the floor. And I've never had any issues with the paint making the drawers stick. Now, painting with a brush and the drawers in place is a completely different story though. Don't worry though, I tape and cover the drawers in plastic first, so then I don't get the paint inside the drawers when it comes time to open them up so I can paint the tops and the sides. I get a lot of questions about chalk paint and why I use it if I'm just going to go through all of these quote-unquote extra steps. Honestly, chalk paint just adheres better than regular old paint. I've tested it. You can actually see how much better chalk paint sticks to surfaces in my primer comparison test on the laminate furniture video. The latex paint scratched off a lot more, even on top of really good primers. Since I saw that comparison with my own eyes, I'm completely a believer of using chalk paint on furniture. Obviously, there are other types of paint that adhere just as well as chalk paint does, but there is no comparison for me when it comes to chalk paint versus latex paint. Chalk paint is just so much better and worth the extra money in my opinion. After the first coat of paint was dry, all of the wood grain in the wood was just really noticeable. So I used a trick that I learned from Danny at Just Paint It by Danny to fill in the wood grain. I added some water to some spackling so I could brush it on all over the wood grain to fill it in. After it was dry, I sanded it all smooth with 220 grit sandpaper, and then I painted another coat of the chalk paint on. Unfortunately, though, I think that the spackling made the tannins in the wood grain bleed through. So, I had to prime it again to block the orangey looking stains from showing up. I ended up spraying 2 more coats of shellac, and then I let it dry completely overnight again. And then I painted another coat of chalk paint on the desk. After that coat of paint was dry, I put my favorite water-based polyurethane into my paint sprayer and I sprayed 3 coats of it onto the desk, letting it dry between coats again. Chalk paint really needs to be top coated because it's such a porous material. The satin polyurethane top coat gives the paint added durability, but it also makes the furniture easy to wipe down when you get anything on it. It's also what gives the paint some sheen, other than the super matte sheen that chalk paint is. I like to put a little bit of water in the poly, so then it takes just a little bit longer to dry, making it dry more soft and smooth. I also like to sand the poly smooth with 400 grit sandpaper after each coat of poly has dried completely. It helps make it feel so much smoother. Before I share what the desk looks like now, take a second to hit the like and subscribe buttons. It really helps YouTube share my videos with more people, so thank you so much. So here's what the desk looked like before, and here's what it looks like now. This one was a really simple makeover, but it's still crazy to me to see how some paint can completely change the look of a piece. It went from an old piece of furniture at a thrift store to a fresh, cute desk to work at. So now I'm wondering, have you ever used a paint sprayer before? Let me know in the comments if you have and what you thought of spraying.